All right, I see a few people still connecting to audio, but I think we could get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the final event and keynote speech for Love Your Body Week. We are so excited to have you all here and so grateful that you were able to join us throughout the week. Today, we have the honor of hosting Shilo George for our keynote talk. Shilo will be presenting their presentation on body sovereignty, building a road to body autonomy, healing, and self-determination. We are so happy to have Shilo here, and I will pass it away in just a second, but I will remind everyone Shilo will be taking questions at the end. If you want to put questions in the chat throughout, we can just save those and stockpile them for the end, or you can just write it down and save it until Shilo opens that up for everyone. And Shilo, you can take it away.
Great, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. I am a PSU alumni, so I got my bachelor's degree at PSU and my master's degree. So it's great to be back at a PSU event. And I probably about 7 years ago, maybe, I was asked to do a very similar presentation on my body sovereignty project at, it was at the Women's Center, Resource Center, and it was for like a body love group that they had on campus at the time. And that was the first time I ever got paid to do this. So I think it's like a great kind of looping back, and it makes me feel really excited. So I'm glad that you all are here, and I guess we'll just kind of get started. I'm a pretty, I try to be kind of relational. I try to tell stories. I do sometimes cuss because I'm kind of a boss ass bitch. So that's what you're going to get tonight. So if there's any kiddos around, sorry. And that's just how I roll when I do this presentation. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you. Hopefully you all can see that okay. Does it look good? Thumbs up from some folks. Okay, great. Thank you. Hold on just a second. Okay, great. I'm so much better on Zoom than I was back at the beginning of the pandemic. I feel much more comfortable with it. So, but I've definitely had my moments, let me tell you. I'm Shilo George. I'm Southern Cheyenne-Arapaho. I'm also Scottish and Irish, and I use she, her, or they, them pronouns. And I live as a guest on Chinuk Wawa lands, about 35 miles northwest of Portland. Although I do spend time in Portland as well and work with a lot of clients in Portland through my consulting firm, which is called Łush Kumtux Tumtum Consulting, which means a great awakening of the heart and spirit in Chinuk Wawa, which is one of the trade languages of this region. It actually goes all the way up into what is known as Canada and all the way down south. So trade language has many, many languages encompassed into it. And so it's a way to honor some of the ancestors and the people, their descendants who live in this area. So, and it really is heart-centered, spirit-centered work that I do. So, this part of my work is very personal. Telling these stories and talking about my own experiences makes me kind of vulnerable, but I'm okay with that. I've decided where my boundaries are at and what I want to share. I think it's important to share some of these stories with you all, and so I'm okay with that. But really just remembering that kind of vulnerability, and if you can keep my confidentiality of some of the details of my story, I would appreciate that. But the lessons you learn, please feel free to share. And things like that. My consulting work, which is a bit different from this work, that's around body, it's connected but different, is really around trauma-informed practices and liberation work. I work with a lot of government agencies doing that work, which is really interesting because when I started my consulting business, I didn't think I'd be working with governments, but it's ended up being pretty cool. So I am going to talk about trauma-informed practices towards the end of this presentation today, which is kind of newer for this presentation, but I wanted to be a little bit more clear about how I built the building blocks of this sovereignty project, which is a healing project for myself. So body sovereignty and my body sovereignty project, which is like, I guess the name of my project, is really specific to me, but there are building blocks, there are questions that I asked myself that anybody could ask themselves. So that's what we're going to do today. And I guess that's my little intro. This is a photo or an image that I made from a portrait, not a portrait, a picture that someone took of me. So just recently created this image. You'll see some of my artwork throughout this presentation, because artwork and being creative is a part of a creative healing process for me. And creating artwork about myself with my image and my body and how I get to decide to show my body feels really good and empowering. Okay. So before we get started, I want to be really thoughtful about doing a land and labor acknowledgement. And I want to give a shout out to my friends, Brianna and Stephanie at Uprise Collective. They inspired me to add in the labor acknowledgement to the land acknowledgement, which is really important. And I wanted to give a shout out to them. Uprise is doing some really cool work around water and water rights very soon, and it'll be on Zoom. So if you look up their Uprise Collective, I think it's uprisecollective.org, and we'll have their information, or on Facebook. So you should probably check them out. But I just wanted to, acknowledge that I'm a guest on Multnomah Lands. I also spend a lot of time in Portland, and there are many, many, many nations that have called the Portland metro area home over the centuries. So a few of those folks are the Multnomah, the Chinuk folks, and there's several bands of Chinuk folks, the Molalla, the Kalapuya, the Tualatin, the Clackamas, and the Cowlitz north across the Columbia River. And then there's the confederated tribes, several of them that we have nowadays, like the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, Cowlitz tribe, and the Chinook Nation, which is up in Washington State, but their traditional lands are both in Oregon and Washington. So I want to just, honor those ancestors that are here and their descendants who are doing amazing work, who are standing up for land rights, water rights, land back, who are doing community work and community healing work that's really essential and important. So I want to make a shout out to all of my friends and relatives doing that work. Also, in addition to doing land acknowledgements, it's important to acknowledge the stolen labor along with the stolen land of this nation, and the stolen labor of our Black and of African descent relatives and their ancestors who were brought here against their will and built the vast wealth of this nation, and that wealth that many of us and most of us continue to have the privilege of benefiting from that vast wealth. So I want to acknowledge that stolen labor and also connect the conversation today with the idea of people's bodies being worth less than others or reviled and dehumanized, and how that impacts people over generations, and that colonial structure of using land, of using bodies, of using labor against people's wills and without people's consent continually. And what does that mean for us as a nation, and how are we still seeing those things on an individual level, on a family and community level, and on an institutional level? So the other thing that's really important to acknowledge with those land and stolen labor acknowledgement is that Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks are extremely, we're very resilient. I don't want to say the word resilient. We're very, we're resistant to all of these types of violence. And we still celebrate, we gather together, we celebrate our brilliance, we come together and love each other and create healing and community together. And that's a really important piece of this work. And hopefully you'll be able to see that through some of my conversation tonight. So shout out to all those folks, and also our Afro-Indigenous relatives. I have a couple of Afro-Indigenous relatives, and I think there is one of them here tonight. So love you, you know who you are. And so, okay, well, let's continue. And I think you're really going to see that acknowledgement reflected in the conversation tonight. So what we're going to talk about tonight is I'm going to talk a little bit about my body sovereignty project, what it is, how I came to create it, why I created it. And then I want to talk about two examples of the body sovereignty work that I'm doing. I kind of am going to flip them. I wrote them the wrong way on the slide. We're going to talk about embodied movement first, and then being a boss and navigating health systems. And then after that, I'll have some questions for you to kind of think about if you're interested in exploring some of these questions and ideas for yourself and creating a healing project, or a way to empower yourself, or you know, however you navigate. And this is really, I mean, I'll talk about my identities in just a second, but like, this isn't just for fat people, but this is about anyone who struggles with your body and struggles with a colonial structure that vilifies and demonizes your body and how your body is made, how you express yourself in your body, your ability to move, or how your body moves, and things like that. So it's not just, I kind of am talking about fatness for myself in particular, but there's a lot of overlap for people with other kinds of bodies as well. And this is me and my friend Carrie. Several years ago, Carrie and Al moved to Albuquerque. I will make it to Albuquerque someday to visit you. And so we had a photo shoot where we laid in bed and ate cookies, and we're really fat and cute and gorgeous babes. And so I always like to include some of these photos in my work and have for many years. So some of my identities that I hold, I'm mixed race, obviously Indigenous, and have also Scottish and Irish background. I am white passing, which is very important to acknowledge in this space, especially when when I talk about navigating health systems. I am someone who can get away with being a little bit more of a little punk bitch than maybe other people can, and may not have the privilege to show up demanding, you know, certain services or whatever. So I want to acknowledge that, and that it, you know, it really does, it is impactful to have the for people to not see the indigeneity in me, but it is not the same as my Black and Brown relatives and friends and community members who are dealing with the violence and the surveillance, and the barriers that they deal with on a daily basis. So I want to be really clear about that. I identify as Two-Spirit and Indigiqueer, and I'm really proud of that. I also am disabled. I have chronic pain and chronic illness that I've been especially navigating during the pandemic, because I didn't have access to a pool for almost 2 years, which is, I think, a common thing for many people during the pandemic, especially. I am a trauma survivor, and that has impacted how I feel about my body and the conversation in my mind about my body and my embodiment. So, and it also inspired why I love to do trauma-informed practices. And then I'm a proud auntie of many, many, many nibblings, both some who I'm biologically related to and others who I'm related to through kinship system or just because we have adopted each other. So that is a really important part of who I am when I show up in the world. So Yeah. So I just want to kind of give you a brief kind of context of why I would create a body sovereignty project. When I was growing up, there was a lot of chaos. Like, some of the adults in my life were very young, maybe not making the best decisions, maybe having some games that they like to play. Um, my biological father, he had a lot of drug issues and was in and out of my life a lot and was not really able to have the capacity to be a good dad, and to be there for me. I also dealt with some abuse, and so I'm not going to get into any of that, but I just want to give you kind of the context. And as I was growing up in the 80s and the 90s, there was a really big emphasis on health and on thinness, which we still have, but there was a very particular kind of it in the 80s, like, aerobics, jazzercise, lots of dieting, different kinds of diets. And there was just this kind of pervasive, in my memory, fear that my family had that I was going to be fat when I got older. And I'm using the term fat not as a pejorative or a negative word, but just as like literally a descriptor. And so there was a lot of emphasis on what I was eating, how my body looked. Was I going to be healthy? And there was other women, and especially in my mom's family, that were fat also, and they were really struggling. So it was kind of one of those intergenerational circumstances where you go to the dieting place with your mom or your grandma. I mean, some people maybe had those experiences. And so I think it was one of these things growing up where it was like there was this emphasis on my body size, but not on literally keeping me safe from abuse. And so I think that kind of created this like weird shift in me. And I think that many of us who experience trauma related to our bodies as children, we kind of cope by sometimes being disassociated or outside of our bodies, or our bodies aren't a safe place for us anymore, which is really sad if you think about it, because our bodies are ours, right? That's like literally our place, our home. And if we don't feel like it's a safe place or a worthy place or a good place, it's really, really hard to live your life. And that's why I think a lot of us who have trauma and face discrimination based on our body, whether it's our skin color, our size, our sexuality, our gender expression, our disability, whatever it is. And it could be all of those things or some of them. It's very difficult for us, I think, many of us, to cope with that. And it can create a lot of issues. And so, as I moved through my teens and into a young adult, I developed an eating disorder. And really struggled with food my entire life and really hated myself. And so, I'm 46. So probably in my mid 30s, I started to do more healing work. And then I got to graduate school and things got really hard. And I'll talk about that in a minute, just real briefly. But these are some photos of me throughout my life. The one that's on the far right is part of that's my high school photo that got into the book at the end of the school yearbook. And so my sister always says I look like a 35-year-old New Jersey mob wife. And I just had this look of just being really angry because I felt pretty angry in school. But anyway, this is me when I was, I don't know, like maybe 7. This is my dad, Owen. He's not my biological father, yet he is the dad that raised me since I was 2, and I absolutely love him. He literally saved my life. I also really love my mom. I love my biological father. However, he was the oldest out of all those people when I was growing up, and I think was just really grounded and loving and just saw me as his from day one. And I would be a much bigger mess without his love and really solid support of me throughout my entire life. Like, I'm his kid, like there's no doubt. And I'm also really thankful to my older brother and sister for sharing their dad with me. So yeah, this is a cute little photo of us. Lots of fishing growing up, hiking, things like that. You can see my Michael Jackson sweatshirt. It's pretty cool in that photo, rocking the pink and the red. Um, and then just to kind of think about, when I was going through healing around my body, I went through and I looked at photos of myself when I was young, because in my mind, I always was fat. Yet when I looked at photos, I was like, not really. I kind of had curves at a young age. And so the photo on the left is me when I was about 9 years old in a kid's racquetball tournament, which was sponsored by a dentist, which is why there's a giant toothy smile on my shirt. And then when I was in high school, my parents bought me this like Nordic track. And it's just, I always talk about this as I look kind of happy in the photo. It's hard to see me with the image quality, but I was actually really upset and angry that I would be given a workout equipment. I probably said that I wanted it at the time, but I didn't really want it, right? I've kind of felt pressured. So I look at these photos, especially of me at 9, which is when I was first put on diets, and it just makes me really sad and kind of disgusted. I wish that, people had left me alone. And my parents were trying to do their best. They were listening to doctors who were giving them advice. They were listening to society. And I just look back on 9-year-old Shilo and I'm like, girl, I love you. And I'm so sorry, So I just wanted to give you a little context. If you're someone who felt this during your childhood, I encourage you to look if you're at your photos, if you have access to them, to give you a little bit of context of maybe who you were, just a snapshot in time. So yeah, so the gift of body sovereignty. When I was in graduate school, I had was under a lot of stress. I was going through a healing process at the same time of graduate school, and it just wasn't a good fit. And I ended up, I would say I had like a nervous breakdown basically, and it took me several years to recover from it. And a couple of like probably 2 years after I graduated, I just had a really horrible summer and I was really, really depressed. And I was very much triggered. Now I know that I had been in a like constant emotional flashback, which I'm not going to get into what that is. You can totally Google it if you want to. Because I have complex PTSD, but I didn't understand that at the time. And I was really just, I felt like I didn't have any other options. And I kind of reached out to my ancestors, and that's part of my spirituality. And I was crying. I remember laying in my bed in my favorite dress, eating Cheetos, and I was crying. And my ancestors were like, you don't, there's things that you can do to help yourself. And I feel like I had, I'd done therapy and medication and going to ceremony and all of these things. And so they just kind of, my ancestors just talked to me and said, you have the power to change things for yourself. And I said, I feel like I'm in a deep hole, like a well. I kept thinking of like, one of those wells where people used to get water. And I could see the sky up above me, but I felt like I was so far down in a well and I just couldn't get out. And it was horrible. And I felt like there was no other options for me. And they really told me, yeah, there is. And so I said, well, I'll continue to do this healing work. I was like stuck at a wall, like I'd hit a wall in my healing. And I said, I'll continue to, to go through and do this healing work. If you, when I hit a wall like this, where I feel like I can't go any further, if you help me get over that wall, right? And I said, whether you help me with like a song or or a conversation with someone or a story or a dream, anything to kind of help me figure out what the problem is and how to get through it. I will continue to I'll do the hard work, but I just need your help and support. And so the ancestors were like, yes. And so one of the things that happened that summer was the ancestors told me I needed to create a healing, I don't know what to call it. I called it my body sovereignty project, to make it understandable for myself, to be clear about the healing that I was wanting to work on. What did that look like? And so I decided to think about three areas of my healing that I wanted to focus on, because there's so much there with that healing. And so I needed to kind of focus. And so they helped me with that. So I have three areas of my body sovereignty project. One is my relationship with food, which is fraught, very, very fraught as someone with an eating disorder. Being embodied through movement. So coming back to my body through movement. And you notice I'm not using the word exercise, because for me, that's a word that makes me think of dieting and forced to move. So I don't want to use that word, right? That doesn't work for me. That's activating. That's a triggering word for me. And then healing from sexual trauma, which is a very personal part of this work, which I don't talk about with people. And so one of the things the ancestors told me was, this isn't, this work isn't about just you sitting there thinking about things. This is really about you doing, you acting, like verb. And because I'm someone who thinks all the time. Maybe you're one of those people who intellectualizes everything, right? And that can be part of a coping skill. Like, I don't want to be embodied and feel my emotions because it's terrifying. So I'm going to think through everything. I'm going to just process and process and process. And so the ancestors said, you have processed a lot. And in this project, you must do. Verb, you must move. And so I said, okay. So that was one of their guidelines for me. The other one is that they said you must share this work with others, and not share when you're all done with a project, which the reasons why it's called a project is because it'll never be done, right? We know our healing never ends. It just we keep moving through. And they said, you need to share this, and you need to share where you're at in the middle of it. Like, what are you still struggling with? What do you want to do more of? That kind of thing. And so this is a photo of me at Fat Camp on Orcas Island, I think like 5 years ago, maybe. And it was, when I was growing up in the 80s, we had fat camps where you like had to go lose weight, and they would give you a like certain diet and all this stuff. But this fat camp was about fat people coming together and just having a good time outside. And so I actually have a lot of stories from fat camp if you ever want to hear one, especially the one about the canoe. But I probably am not going to tell that one tonight. But yeah, this is my hiking uniform, or what I call my hiking regalia. So my badass sweatshirt with my cat heads in space leggings, and my cool pose, and my hair in my ponytails. So I was supposed to go on a hike this day, but it was gorgeous. So I just decided to sit on the shore with some friends and like write poetry and take photos, like selfies of myself. So that's what I did during the hiking portion of Fat Camp. So I want to talk about the idea of survivance, because I talk about this. I talk about sovereignty, which I'll tell you what body sovereignty means to me in a minute. But I also talk about survivance. And so I'm going to give you this like really interesting definition by Anishinaabe scholar and writer Gerald Visner. And he defines survivance as an active sense of presence, the continuance of Native stories, not a mere reaction or a survivable name. Native survivance stories are renunciations of dominance, tragedy, and victimry. Survivance means the right of succession.
Stop.
or reversion of an estate, and in that sense, the estate of native survivancy. So I know, like, pretty wild definition there. But I really, for me, survivance is about, yes, many of us are experiencing and have experienced a lot of trauma, historical and intergenerational trauma, yet that is not going to define us. What defines us is our culture. What defines us, especially as Native people or Indigenous people globally, is our culture, our traditions, our language, and how do we continue those stories, those actions, to move through these like colonial spaces that are like opposite usually of how we are supposed to be, right, as Indigenous people, and just doing that and taking back, right, our traditions and bringing them into the present to move us into the future. And there's a lot of different ways to kind of think about this idea, but my body sovereignty project is an act of survivance. It's not just survival, it's beyond that to survivance. He's an amazing writer, by the way. So you can check out any of his books. Totally will blow your mind. And then I wanted to give you a definition of what body sovereignty means to me. And I use, as an Indigenous person, as a Cheyenne person, I use sovereignty specifically about governance, about ownership and total ownership, right? And that idea of autonomy and self-determination. And what does it mean to have body sovereignty in a colonial structure that does not allow for that? What does that mean to have a super fat body in a colonial structure that hates fatness, that wants to get rid of fat people, right? Even taking out a perfectly healthy organ, right? And if anyone has had weight loss surgery, I'm not, this isn't about you being a bad person. You do you, your body is yours. I'm just talking for me and my body and in general. So for me, body sovereignty is that my body is sacred. Where do I hear that message from? Do I hear that message from American society? Are we hearing, especially as femme presenting people or women, that our bodies are sacred? I'm certainly not hearing that message on a lot of levels, right? And I get this message from my traditions. I get this message from Creator. I get this message from the ancestors. They supersede this colonial bullshit. They supersede this colonial bullshit. They're the ones who tell me who I am and what I am. Not the marketing people, not the colonial government. This is really where my power comes from. My grounding comes from. If I'm a tree, my root system is nourished from these traditions and culture. It's kind of a little bit of a shelter from the tidal wave of fuckery and colonial garbage that's constantly coming at me. And it might be coming at you as well. You might also be feeling some of these in your own way. I know I'm not the only one. My body is a gift from Creator and is thousands of prayers of my ancestors. What do you think it does in my mind when I can shift from a horrible, fat, lazy person and all the stereotypes that go with it, a disgusting queer, right? A defective, disabled person, all of that hatred, right? All of that self-loathing, all the things I was taught when I was little about who I am or what I am and that I don't have worth and value, right? Early childhood trauma. When I can shift my mindset from that to I'm sacred because Creator says I am, and Creator says all of us are sacred. Right? All of us Indigenous people are sacred. Other people are too. I'm just speaking from a cultural lens, a traditional lens. That my body is a gift from Creator and has thousands of prayers from my ancestors. That's a very different place to be grounded in. than this colonial garbage. But it's not an easy place to stay in because of the colonial garbage, right? It's really hard not to get sucked into that negativity. And when we do, it's not to feel bad about it. Like, oh, I messed that up. Oh, I should be doing better. No, no, no. It's really hard. I have many moments. Yes, Bria. Yes, I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. So glad you're here. I can sometimes be in that space and sometimes I can't. And I still want to have grace for myself when I can't, because it's hard. My ancestors are my life collaborators and they fully support my healing. They fully support that healing. They are collaborators. When I go in and I work with colonial governments, I bring my ancestors with me and I talk about my ancestors. My ancestors are here to help us. And some people in those rooms are like, yes, I get it. Other people are like, what is she talking about? I'm not sure about that. But that's okay, because that's how I show up. That's how I'm going to show up in those spaces, because things are going to change and they need to change. And it's okay to show up. For me, it is. And again, privilege to show up in those ways. I want to be real about that. I have a sovereign right to my body, to my sacred responsibility to it, to my connections, and to all the choices about my body. This is a sovereign right for me, and I am going to pick it up and take it. No one is going to give me that sovereign right. I fight for it every fucking day. Every day I fight for it. Probably a lot of you fight for it too, in many, many different ways. I'm not going to let them take this from me. I'm going to fight for it. Or some days it does get taken from me, but tomorrow is a new day, right? And that's the thing when I think about my body and growing up with all this diet culture and framing of dieting, is that I want to be in relationship with my body in a way that feels good for me, that I am the steward of this body. I am the protector of this body. Right? Not that I need to take care of this body because the doctors say I should, or I should look a certain way, or I should be straight, or I should dress a certain way, right? Because somebody else is telling me this. No, I'm sacred in myself. I'm sovereign in myself. And that responsibility of stewardship becomes a responsibility of love and of respect, and not one of have to's, supposed to's. Oh, I guess I should go to the gym. Oh, I really want to eat that thing, but throw it away in the garbage. Some marketing person made that up. This idea that happens with dieting where it's like the before and after photo. I grew up, probably all of us grew up understanding that concept of the before and after photo. And it has become like embedded in my brain because I've seen it for so many decades that it became part of how I thought. Oh, I can't go on that trip until I lose some weight. Oh, I can't, no one's ever going to love me until I lose some weight. Oh, I shouldn't buy any more clothes until I lose some weight. Oh, I shouldn't get rid of those old clothes until I lose weight, right? And so many, many examples of that. And one day I thought, I bet some asshole in some marketing firm in New York City came up with that idea to sell some diets, and now it is in my brain like an invasive weed that I have to continually pluck out. And I was like, And just those realities for me were validating, and they also suck. Body sovereignty is my survivance and exists outside of colonial structures and also colonial understanding and imagining. We exist beyond this colonial structure that basically is like a lot of white dudes, old white men fighting over greed. I don't want to be in this reality with them. This isn't one that I want. My body is timeless. It's healing. It's sacred, and it's also action focused. And I don't mean action as only movement. I mean action as what I'm thinking, pulling out those invasive thoughts, right? Action in terms of how I present myself, how I show up, how my gender is expressed or not, right? Okay. All right. Feeling the energy. Hopefully you can also feel the energy. I don't know. I can only see a few of your beautiful faces. I'm going to scroll through, see who's here. Oh, I know some people here. Oh, good to see you. Oh my gosh, Will's here. Oh. Okay, I'll go back to what I'm doing. I just wanted to see who was in the room. Okay. So next on my list is ancestors. I feel like crying. These are some of my Cheyenne ancestors. On the left, this was taken in probably like the 1890s in the Oklahoma, what was then the Oklahoma Territory. So the little girl you see is my great grandmother, Mary. And then the woman on the right is her mama. And her name is Bonhis Medicine Woman Fletcher, which medicine women do not get this thing in your head about woo and all that stuff. Literally, that was a very common name, and it probably just meant that she gathered medicines. Okay, so I just have to make that clear. She was a leader in our tribe at the time and learned English to be able to talk to the Indian agents and get food because people were starving. And then the woman, the grandma on the left is my grandma cow, a buffalo woman. And so, yeah, these are some of my grandmas. I love them. And unfortunately, my grandma, Bonhis Medicine Woman of Fletcher, she passed away a couple years after this photo was taken in an accident. And so the photo on the right, my grandma is the little girl that the arrow is pointing to. And she's holding the hand of the Mennonite minister on our lands. The government gave each reservation or land allotments to a certain church. And so the Mennonites, the German Mennonites, were the ones assigned to Cheyennes and Arapahoes in Oklahoma. And then his daughter, the preacher's daughter, is right next to him on the other side. And then all these other kids are my great grandma's brothers, and then some other children, probably in their family group, their kinship system. And this was the day that they were sent to boarding school in Kansas. And so my great grandmother was there from that age. I think she was probably 4, maybe 5, until she was 12. And she had a really, really rough life. A lot of the traditions in our family stopped with her because of probably that boarding school trauma. And then she married, some white men, and especially her first marriage was forced into that marriage, and he was much older than her. And so she just felt like at the time that it was better if her children didn't know that they were Cheyenne, didn't speak Cheyenne, didn't understand culture. But also this grandmother didn't know I was going to be born in 1975 and try to do what I could to heal and bring that together. But I also think these grandmothers, I know these grandmas are in my heart and are here with me. And all the healing that I do also heals them and also heals for the next generation, right? Because time is not necessarily linear. So just a little FYI about that. So you could see when I talk about my ancestors, there's many of them, but these are a couple of them. Some other things that really help me with my body sovereignty project are, of course, my being Cheyenne, but also being a super fat activist. This is me at the gym a few years ago. I was having fun with a photo shoot. Again, you'll see photographs, selfies are a really important part of my sovereignty work. And then below are some friends of mine from Vancouver, BC, at a really amazing pool, Kitsilano Pool. It's amazing if you ever go to Vancouver and go swimming in the summer. And yeah, so queerness is super helpful. And it's interesting because I feel like sometimes in queer community, I feel kind of old. And I think I called an elder, even though I'm like 46, but in Native community, I'm like pretty young still. Because our elders are like in their 60s and 70s and 80s and up, right? And so it's this weird kind of dynamic that happens. And I feel like I get like my boldness from queerness. My just kind of like, I'm not going to take this shit. And then there's some other stuff I'll tell you about in just a minute. But these different facets of the communities I belong to, and there's more than this, are really what helped me, you know, make it through my life, and help me understand who I am. But I do have to show up a little bit differently sometimes in different communities, although I've been trying not to do that as much. So, so a little bit about my relationship with food: fraught, difficult, all of that kind of thing. This is me on the left when I was, I think, probably 2 or 3, eating some kind of dessert in the sink of my great-grandparents' house, which I am currently living in. So just that way, a little ways, is that exact sink, different faucet. And so it's kind of cool to live in their house. And then, of course, on the right is me with egg tarts at an amazing, I'm not gonna be able to think, dim sum place in Vancouver, BC. There will be a lot of Vancouver, BC photos in here because I have a lot of friends who are like family who I absolutely love who are from there. Great place to go if you ever go and you need some ideas, cool places and places to eat, let me know. But I think like I'm trying to, with food, for it to be less, for it just to be food. That it doesn't, like, food for me has so many things attached to it, kind of like baggage. Like we talk about relationships having baggage. Well, my relationship with food has like tons of baggage. Probably not rare in this this country for us. But just, it's just food. The other thing I do is I really like to eat food that was not common for me when I was growing up to eat, that wasn't part of diet plans, because it's less triggering for me. It's less work mentally and emotionally for me when I eat that food. But I also think that I, in the last probably 10 years, have been around a lot of people who love food and are not worried about calories and all that stuff. They just really love food. So like when I go to Vancouver, BC, I really love to go to this all you can eat sushi place. And I love going with a big group of friends, and you literally just eat until you think you're gonna like throw up, which I know sounds terrible, but it's so good. And then you get to visit with so many people, and it's just this really beautiful experience, right? And so I literally go to Vancouver to visit friends and have a good time and laugh hysterically, and then literally eat. And I always have to bring some snacks across the border, because one time one of the border the US border agents was like, what are you like, do you need to declare anything? What are you bringing across? And I'm like, nothing. And he's like, you went to Vancouver for a week and you didn't bring anything back? And I was like, dude, I go there to eat and be with my friends. I'm not going shopping. Like, that's not happening. I was like, I've got some like wrappers in the back from the vegan bakery I went to that didn't even make it to the border. I mean, so now I bring snacks or something with me because they think it's real weird that I'm not buying other stuff. So yeah, just trying to work on I'm down, let's go. Yes. Love Vancouver. But just thinking about, and one of the things that I still struggle with is eating around people, eating with family. And it's not because people are saying anything to me. It's just really old habits of anxiety. And so sometimes, like if you ever see me in an event, I oftentimes won't get up and eat until the end. And part of that is a little bit cultural, because elders and others should eat first. And part of it is like my anxiety, where I just want to wait until the end. So anyways, I'm, it's a work in progress like many other people, but we need food to sustain ourselves. And I found that also being more embodied helps me understand what my body kind of wants food wise. I would listen to friends throughout my life be like, oh, I ate this thing and it made me feel really sleepy or weird or itchy. And I would just be like, what are they talking about? And then when I was starting to be a little bit more embodied, I was like, oh, this is what they're talking about. But I was so disassociated with my body for so many, many years that I just didn't even track any of that. Okay, I need to get going. So movement. I do lots of different kinds of movement, especially trying to recover from the pandemic. So I really am into this is one of my favorite pictures of myself. I'm really into water walking. And this is the pool I go to. This is the deep end though. I walk obviously in the shallow end. But I love it. And my nephew takes me and he's my walking coach. And we go twice a week. And he tells me everything about his life and all the things he's learning in high school. And we talk about world events. It's amazing. And he has this routine and it's just awesome. And I love spending time with him. And I love it that he's like 18 years old and doesn't mind taking his auntie to the pool to go swimming. It makes me feel really good. I love swimming in the water. It's been really helpful, especially I have fibromyalgia. So being in like that weightlessness is really nice for my body. And I also feel really accomplished. I can do lots of stretching that feels really good. So yeah, water walking with James is one of my favorites. And then one thing I kind of wanted to talk about around internalized ableism. I've had to do a lot of work in this area with myself because, in our society, you're supposed to be able-bodied, you're supposed to be able to produce, you're supposed to be able to, we live in the Pacific Northwest. Oh, you should be going hiking, running, biking, and that's all great stuff. But like a lot of us can't do those things, or we can only do them every so often, or they have to be modified in some way. And so I have really had to do a lot of work around like I use a cane right now. I'm also waiting to get a walker where you can sit on it. And that's been a little bit difficult to get because I have wide hips. Obviously, I'm super fat. So I wasn't sure if I could find a walker you could sit on that was wide enough. And I really need something where I can walk, but I can take a break because there's not enough seating anywhere. That's one thing I've noticed. When you start to have difficulties with mobility, you will, and you've been able-bodied your entire life, you will notice really quickly how fucked up our environments are and not made for people with disabilities or mobility issues or low vision or anything like that. Deaf folks, super excited. There's ASL interpretation for this event, by the way. Thank you. And one thing that was said to me by an elder in the fat activist community was, I want to be able to go out and do things and have a good time. And if that means a walker or a scooter or a cane or whatever it is that I need for my mobility to get out in the world and have a good time, is what is like totally fine. We don't make fun of, well, sometimes people get made fun of for having glasses, but that's kind of rare. And that's usually younger, like adolescents and kids. But when we get to adulthood, many of us are wearing glasses and oftentimes they're cool glasses, right? And it's like a fashion statement. But like we oftentimes don't make fun of people for needing corrective lenses, right? And so really just trying to think about that and normalize it for myself. It was very difficult for a long time to let my friends see that I was having trouble walking and moving. It was really embarrassing for me with my mobility. I also have a lot of anxiety. And so like last December, I went to a friend's party and was recovering from cellulitis in my legs. So I wasn't feeling very good, but there was no way in hell I was going to miss this party. And so I was leaving and I was exhausted And at first I was like, why are three of my friends walking me to my car? Like, that feels like a little bit of overkill. But then I like had this panicky, it wasn't a panic attack, but a panicky thing happen. And I knew I could have made it to my car, but my brain was telling me I couldn't. And so my friend was next to me and holding on to me while I was like, and just having this panic. And then the other friend went and got a chair from in the house. And then the third friend went and got my car and brought it around closer. And it was really embarrassing for me at first. And I hated it. And then I thought, Shilo, this is one of the ways that like your friends show love to you, right? If they were having a hard time, I would not be embarrassed of them. I would not be judging them for anything. I would want to help them, right? So those are some kind of things I've done to sort of help myself with those internalized feelings. And again, my body's sacred. My ancestors are happy with me, and they love me no matter what my body is doing, no matter what my mobility is or anything like that. Let's see. Sorry, I'm just checking time. So yeah, this is Carrie and I again in one of our photo shoots from when they left for Albuquerque. Super cute. The other thing about movement that was super helpful to me that I thought of when I was thinking about embodiment through movement, and this is one of the things where the ancestors were like, you can come back to your body through moving, right? And through doing movement. And I thought, like, I don't want to really go to the gym. Like the gym feels very triggering to me, very overwhelming to me. Although I did get a trainer, and it was a good experience for me. I did that for a while, but I really thought about what kind of, because I was really active as a kid, like out in the outdoors. Like my mom and my dad were like hiking and camping and fishing and gathering mushrooms and hunting and all of that. So I thought of what were the things that made me feel really good. And so kayaking is one of them, and hiking, swimming, so I kind of thought back of my childhood of what were the things that felt really good to me. And then how can I do those things? And maybe I need to modify them in my life. And so this is me when I was in like 5th grade on the extremely haunted Queen Mary ship that's docked in Long Beach, California. Super haunted. The pool. So yeah, if you can feel things, I don't know about going to that ship. But I think that that was super helpful for me and thinking about moving as a kid and what that was like. So those were some of the things that came to my mind when I was thinking about movement. And what things might be good. I also do a lot of hacking, kind of fat hacks and disability hacks of, depending on how I'm feeling and how my body's feeling, what can I do in the current moment of what I have capacity for? So sometimes like, yeah, I wish I could go for like a 5-mile hike, but that's not going to happen. So I have an area of forest that I really love to go to. And have I gone over my time? It's 6:30, right? Okay, sorry. I'm like, have I gone 3 hours over? Because I could just talk and talk and talk. So I go to this forest, which is a forest I've been going to since I was a little girl. And sometimes I just drive out there and I bring a chair with me. And I just, sometimes cry in the woods, talk to the ancestors out there. I love the wind, the smell of the trees. And things like that. So sometimes it's driving into nature, and just, that's something that feels really good to me. And then I had this thought recently where I'm like, I really, really want to put my my bare feet on the grass, but I really wanted to lay in the grass. Getting up and off of the ground or the floor is really hard for me. It kind of scares me I'm going to get stuck. Probably wouldn't, but still the fear is there. And then I had this funny thought the other day where I was like, I literally could put a chair in the lawn and just sit there and put my feet in the grass. Like, I mean, come on, Shilo. Why am I making it harder than it needs to be? So, just kind of talking about that. And the other thing about movement too is when I talk about movement, I want to be really clear. It's not about necessarily changing my body, or definitely it's not about losing weight, but it's just about experiencing my body. And I do want to, and I'm hoping with the walker, I'll be able to have a little bit more fullness in my life, right? I can go to the store probably in a limited way, or I can take my dog for walks because I'll be able to take a rest when I'm tired. And I don't have all this anxiety about, okay, can I make it the whole way? When is there going to be a bench? Blah, blah, blah. And it's all this stuff up here instead of, feeling the embodiment of my being in my body and being outdoors or wherever it is that I'm at. So, okay, navigating health systems like a boss. I do a whole training on this, but I wanted to give you a couple of slides. So this is the second example of my body sovereignty project. This is a really big part of the work that I've done on myself. Like many fat people, and also again, folks that have different bodies that are very much vilified by our society, which aren't bad bodies, but the society we live in sees them as they are bad, have been treated horribly, right? I've not been been given treatments that I deserve because of my body size. I've been ignored things that are happening because I've just had doctors tell me you need to lose weight. I've had doctors talk to me in really disrespectful ways. I've had them talk to me as if I'm not there. And so again, when I was in grad school and I had a nervous breakdown, because of that, I got really sick with an infection. I got flesh-eating bacteria in my right leg, where the calf muscle is. And so I had to have 2 surgeries to take out the dead tissue and all of that. I know it's really intense, but that meant that I had like 8 months of wound care. And it was really intense. And I had a really bad experience at a wound care clinic in town. I will not say where it was. And I thought, you know what? I have had it with these motherfuckers. I am not going to take this bullshit anymore. No. I do not deserve to be treated like this. I do not deserve to be talked to like this. I know what it is that I want to do around my health and wellness. And if it doesn't align with theirs, I don't care, because it's my body, right? It's my sovereign body. And I have in that sovereignty the right to choose, right, how I'm going to treat this body. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So this is this is a meme I made a couple of years ago. And somebody really said I should make this into like a tote bag or something. You're so vain. I bet you think this body is about you. And which is like kind of like inspired by the Carly Simon song. And okay, I got to go to the next slide. So out of this body, and I'm going to talk about the building blocks of this. And I think that is it Alessandra? Are you going to put into the chat a link to the Word doc version of this? Well, not my personal information, but I made a document, and I give this to all of the new providers I work with on a consistent basis, including specialists, therapists, physical trainers. What am I trying to say? PT. What is PT? You know what I'm saying.
Physical therapists.
Thank you. Sorry, I have brain fog sometimes and I can't remember words. So thank you. Anytime that I'm like, what is that? Feel free to like interrupt and help me with my little game of my word game. So physical therapists. So so you want to be on Team Shilo. And this is what they get. This is the first 2 pages of a 4-page doc. So I talk about my identities, and I want them to know that. And then nomenclature or wording, I want them to know, and here's that awesome photo of Carrie and I showing up again, with the cookies, because you know what? They need to know that I like cookies. I don't care. And so I want them to know, I want them to use the word belly instead of panis. I hate that fucking word. I do not know why they use it. And that's, for those of you who don't have one, that is the lower belly that can sometimes hang down. It's also called, like, I have what's called a bee belly. So I actually have 2 bellies. It's the shape of a bee. And so the lower part of the bee belly, in medical terms, they call it a panis, which I looked it up in a medical dictionary. It was hard to find that word, other than it being related to paniculus, which has to do with the eye. But I did find it in a veterinarian dictionary, which is the belly of a whale, which made me laugh and cry at the same time. So yeah, belly is the term I like. Also chest. I don't want them to use the term breast for me. I want them to use the term chest. So I'm just giving them specifics about how I want them to talk to me, how I want them to talk about my body. I do not want the words used. And these are the other words that I'm fine with them using and why I don't want them used. And then the bulk of the rest of the document, this second page and then the third page, as you'll see it, is really my expectations for health. So as a practitioner, if you want to work with me and be on Team Shilo, which is an awesome team to be on, let's be real, is that you are going, and I'm not going to read through all of these, but I'll give you an example. I'll just read the second one. Understand that as someone who has a body that transgresses Western standards and ideals of health, sexuality, body size, and desirability, and someone who has had to deal with many acts of neglect, bias, abuse, and misinformation from medical professionals, I am slow to trust providers. So this also encompasses, do not talk to me about weight loss, surgery. Do not talk to me about dieting. I do want to let you know that if you are someone who doesn't want them to talk about weight loss, surgery, or dieting, and they still fucking do it anyway, one thing that has worked well for me verbally and written in this document, so if you don't want to do a whole document, you don't have to, is I say that it is not culturally appropriate or culturally responsive for me to have a perfectly good organ amputated from my body or to restrict calories. My ancestors do not want me to do that. That is not part of my culture and traditions. And so saying that, will usually, a lot of providers haven't done, like, the medical community is really far behind in, like, liberation wise, obviously, but like that's kind of a thing when you say culture, traditions, culturally responsive, they get a little freaked out because they don't want to, they know they need to be respectful of different people's culture. So I will use that as a way to get them to shut up. So feel free to use that technique for anything that you don't want them talking to you about, even if it's not necessarily true. Like, it's true for me, but like, use whatever techniques work, y'all. We gotta stay safe. And then I have a little section in here where I talked about dieting and how that's impacted my life, and a little statistic about the prevalence of eating disorders. So I'll go to the next. So the last 2 pages is, again, things that they need to do for me to feel safe and comfortable. And then I also included a Instagram post from 2018. Bella, I don't know if you're here, but the photo you took of me is in this. And again, just giving them an idea of how it's impacted me, the things that providers have said to me. Then I describe my body sovereignty project. And then there's a cute picture of my dog because she is on Team Shilo. She is my best friend, number 1. And then I have a whole section on my skills, talents, and resources, because oftentimes we are seen as people of a deficit, which is what the medical community perpetuates all the time. So I want them to see me in other ways. And I want to control the narrative of how they see me. That's the whole point of this for me, is how do I control the situation? How do I top the situation? Right. So the real name of this training, Navigating Health Systems Like a Boss, is originally supposed to be topping your primary care physician. But I figured people might be like, what? So those of you who know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm saying. But it's like, being a boss. Okay. So skills, talents, and resources. That's what I kind of thought up. I literally wrote a list. What are the things I want them to know about me? I want them to know, like, I don't want to be like classist and stuff and like drag out my degrees for everyone. But in that case, I will, because that is part of their thinking. Those providers, they have doctorates, or maybe they're a physician's assistant or whatever. That is the world they live in. So I want them to know that I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, and I graduated summa cum laude from my bachelor's. Not because I want everyone to know that and I want to show off, but I want them to know that I'm smart, right? Because a lot of fat people were seen as stupid. I've had many providers be like, wow, you're so well-spoken, for someone who's fat, right? And so I also want them to know I'm really good at problem solving. I'm an awesome small business owner. I know my shit. I take care of myself. I can research. I create curriculum. I can stand up for myself, and I'm not going to put up with their bullshit. Sometimes I do if I'm feeling rough one day, but for the most part, I don't put up with their crap. And walking in that way, I helps. Just thinking that and knowing that about yourself, the energy you walk into that room with can oftentimes help. You will run into their, occasional person who, but providers will also activate me, as my friend Gabe, who I think is on here, can attest to, who's gone to some of my medical appointments with, when there was a cardiologist that made me really mad. And then I was like, oh, she's not bad. And then the next day I was like, I hate her, because in my mind I had stewed over it all night long. So that was kind of something that happened. But oh, there's the doc in there. So yeah, skills, talents, and resources. Make it about you. Like, you're the center, like it's your body. That's why you're there. And this isn't just about navigating health systems. That's what I use this for. But maybe it's about your own education and navigating the school system. Maybe it's something else that you're navigating where you feel like you need a little bit of some help with your empowerment. What is it that you need? My good friend Athena, again, another friend from Vancouver, BC. We were literally giving a training, and then someone took this photo of us, and that we posed in the middle of a training, because that was really fun. Whoops, wrong way. And then be the honey badger. Don't take their shit. So I try to think of the honey badger. And there's this video, you can look up honey badger, don't take any shit. And there's this guy that's narrating this honey badger that goes to kill a cobra, but then the cobra bites it, and then you think it dies, right? Cobra venom, but really it just puts it asleep for a little while, and then it wakes up and finishes the job, right? And I'm like, that's who I want to be in the medical system. When I first started doing this advocacy work for myself, I want to be the honey badger. I don't necessarily need to be the honey badger anymore, but that's what I was doing. Again, another photo from Vancouver. Independent is a grocery store. And we were on our way to do some training at a college in this town that I can't remember the name of. And so, yeah, honey badger doesn't take any shit. And I don't take any shit from those providers. The other thing that I think I would say I've evolved into from the honey badger is my expectation is to be treated as a collaborator. They have their expertise of medical stuff, fine, but I also am the expert of my own body and my own experience. Also, a lot of us who are fat have disabilities. I've heard this from people who are trans and non-binary. We have to know our own medical shit, because that's how you stay alive. That's how you get your things taken care of, is knowing your own medical issues, knowing medications, knowing procedures, all of that stuff. So that's part of it too. Oh gosh, I'm starting to come. I want to be careful, a little bit careful about time. We may go over just a little bit, and hopefully you can stay on a little longer. Please. Anyways, I wanted to talk. So I do trauma-informed care work. And what I realized when I was creating my body sovereignty project, the specific to navigating health systems, is that I wasn't in systems that were trauma informed, right? And most of the medical systems aren't trauma informed. Sometimes you'll find certain programs or departments are, but oftentimes they're not. And so what I realized is that I needed to find ways to keep myself safe. I needed to find ways to find my own empowerment. It'd be nice if these systems would learn this, but they're not for the most part. So how do I do that for myself? It's a lot of work, I know, and it's not fair. However, this is how I approached it. So one of the things that I really love is this idea, and this comes from Trauma Informed Oregon, but then I kind of added some things to it, is creating a safe context, a safe environment, a safe experience, and thinking about safety as your emotional and psychological safety. Physical safety, yes, but emotional and psychological safety, right? Thinking of trustworthiness. Can I trust this doctor? That's hard for a lot of us to be able to trust our doctors. Is there clear and consistent boundaries, right? Do they understand my boundaries? That whole document that I showed you quickly, that's all about boundaries and being clear with them. This is what I expect from you. If you do not deliver this or you go against my boundaries, this is what's going to happen. These are the consequences of that. I want to be very clear with them because they are logical and they have been trained in this very logical system. So I want to speak to them in their language, which is clear and consistent boundaries. I'm going to be the one to hold those boundaries for them because a lot of them are not good at that. Being transparent or expecting transparency out of them. Predictability is important. Maybe choice is also important. I am a collaborator with you, doctor. I make the final decisions and choices in what meds I'm going to take, procedures I'm going to do. Obviously, I want to hear your opinion and your recommendation, but I will make that final choice because it is my body. Don't ever forget that, right? Consent, so important. Consent, I think we oftentimes think about as physical consent, but what about consent of, I told you I did not want to talk about weight loss surgery or dieting. That is not part of my health and wellness goals, and nor will it ever be. I ask you not to talk about that. You do not have consent to talk to me about that. So, and I know that's really intense and it's scary for a lot of people to think about talking to a doctor like that. So don't feel like if you want to try some of these things, you need to like go all out and say those things. You can say them with paper, like I did with that document, right? Having gratitude for yourself, gratitude for your friends like Gabe who go with me to my medical appointments. And then thinking about restoring power, right? If I want to restore my power in a situation, which could be a relationship, it could be power at work, it could be restoring my power from trauma that I've experienced, is thinking about ways that I feel empowerment. You could see that from my example of thinking about my childhood when there was things that I loved doing that were movement based and how that made me feel. I want to think about myself from a strengths perspective, from a skill building perspective, the strengths perspective of the skills, talents, and resources of that document is an example. Right? I want to be in charge of that narrative. I want to remind them of their biases, and that I'm not this person they think they're seeing. They probably aren't even aware of a lot of their biases. And again, consent is going to be on every single portion of this. And these lists doesn't mean that these are the only things that create a safer context, help restore our power, or promote self-worth, but these are things to start with. Promoting self-worth. This was something that has always been very tricky for me in my life. Many of us who have experienced childhood trauma struggle with a healthy sense of self-worth. It wasn't until I had EMDR trauma therapy, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, amazing. It wasn't until I had that I was actually able to understand, and it took a while, like a couple years of my brain processing through experiences, that my self-worth is inherent within me. And if people like me or give me kudos or whatever outside of myself, like that's nice, but like my self-worth is here, like I'm worthy to be alive just because I'm Shilo. Right. And that sense of security within myself feels amazing, but it's a new feeling for me. Right. Recently had somebody who was like kind of interested, and hanging out with me, and called me like a hot babe on Zoom, and we had a hangout, and it was really nice, and we're probably going to hang out again later. They don't live in Portland. And it was so nice to not be like, oh my God, are they really going to get a hold of me again? Like, did I do everything right? Are they, not any of that attachment stuff, right? I was just like, oh, that was a fun experience. It felt really like empowering, and like from like a person who most of my life was like, nobody's interested in me, nobody likes me. And then after that experience, I was like, everybody's after my hot ass. Like, it's so silly, right? And so just kind of, I don't even know how, self-worth. So those ideas of self-worth, right? So thinking of collaboration, right? I want to collaborate with my doctor. I want to collaborate with my coworkers. I want to collaborate with whoever. Feeling a sense of respect. When a doctor treats me with respect and collaborates with me, and I can really feel that respect, that helps my sense of worth go up, right? If I have respect for myself, grace for myself, right? Mutuality is like, we're in this together because we're mutually benefiting from this. And things like that. And acceptance and non-judgment is really hard. And I think about that in terms of how I accept and try to not judge myself, which is really, really hard, super, super hard. But if you work at it, it gets a little bit better. But I just want to acknowledge that it can be really hard. And then the principles of trauma-informed care are there. You can read through them. I won't go over them because a lot of them were on here already. Okay, so we have this piece. So now we're getting to the questions part. This is the building block part, which I am making a form, and I will I hate the word worksheet, but like a couple pieces of paper to guide a guide. Yes, I like that. To help you, and it will have some of these questions and some extra ones and this slide so you can see trauma-informed practice on it, and you will be sent it, those of you who have signed up. And if you didn't sign up because you're one of my friends and I sent you the link, just let me know and I'll send it to you. You know how to find me. So one of the things to think about, body autonomy building blocks, right? The BAB. It could have been BABA if I would have put another A at the end. Okay, whatever. I'm getting to that point when I'm presenting where it's just random sometimes. Okay. What does physical and psychological / emotional safety look like for me at the doctor's office? So that's a reflection question for you if you so choose to decide. Or at work, or at school, or on public transportation, or when I go to pick my child up from school, like whatever those situations are, or when I go to visit my family. What do I need in this space to feel physically, psychologically, and emotionally safe? Just don't worry about whether it can happen or not. Just write it down. I don't want them weighing me before I go into the doctor's visit. By the way, you can refuse anything. If they tell you you can't, that's bullshit, and you can. What are those things that you need for safety? Some other questions. How do I envision my own body autonomy, right? You heard my definition of body sovereignty. So you don't have to use the term body sovereignty. That may not be appropriate for you, but whatever that feels like for you in your body, how do you envision that self-determination? What does that look like? You could draw it, you could write it out, you could sing about it, you can do anything you want about it. You can talk to someone about it. And I'm a verbal processor, clearly. Who supports my body autonomy and how? Right? Do I support my body autonomy? Maybe, maybe not, right? Depends. When I was first starting this work, there were several friends who supported my body autonomy and had really good conversations with me when I couldn't. I just didn't have it in me. And they would sometimes hold that hope for me, and help me understand some of these concepts. Not necessarily that they were choosing for me, but they were having these conversations in general, or maybe they were sharing with themselves. I support your body autonomy. So if you don't have anyone to write on your list, you can write me down, because I do. From the above questions, what do I need from my medical providers or their office or their facility, right? We can make that broader now that I'm talking about it, to support my body autonomy. What do I need them to do? And again, these can become part of the building blocks if you want to make a statement, right? So you want to be on Team Shilo, which you can name it whatever you want. That's kind of dorky, but that's the only thing I come up with for myself. If you want to make a document for like that for yourself, these are some of the questions to ask yourself to create that. What do I need from them? What are my must-haves in that list, right? For me, they cannot talk to me about dieting and weight loss surgery. Absolutely not. Zero. And so then we can also think about, with that list, don't think about whether they can do it or not. Go through that list and think about what are your must-haves. These are my deal breakers. I have to have these things, right? So you can kind of think about it in those terms. Some other questions. What are my skills, talents, and resources, right? What are the things that you would really want that provider to know about you, to help? And the thing too is that I want a provider to know that I'm really curious about how my body works, because then I want them to be able, some of them are really good educators, right? I love a doctor that's got a dry erase board and like does some education for me, and answers all my questions. And that's a really good way to build rapport as well with your doctor. I want them to know I'm really good at problem solving. I can solve my problems, and things like that. So what are your skills, talents, and resources? Which from the above list can you use to support your body autonomy, your self-determination, and your voice? So I know these are like really, we want to take that like tacit knowledge. So tacit knowledge is knowledge that we're not really aware of how we know about it, and so we want to make it clear. I want to be clear with myself on what I need, what I expect for safety, for creating relationship, for whatever it is, and what do I need for understanding my autonomy and my self-determination and my voice. And even if you never make like a statement like I did to give to your providers or whoever, which is totally fine, you being aware of it can be really empowering. And you can update that list or that document as many times as you want as you go through your own healing process. From the above questions, what do I need from my medical provider to support my body autonomy? Specifically, what do I want them to know about my skills, talents, and resources? And then I want to end with this one piece. This is a buffalo, one of my digital art images of a buffalo that I made recently. Jolene Joseph, who's, I don't know if she considers herself an elder in the Portland Native American community. I don't want to elder her if she doesn't feel like she's old enough to be an elder. She's definitely a leader in our community and a community healer. She's great. And one of the things she talked about with healing was one of the steps about a healing process that she identified was, I believe I'm worthy of healing. That it's really hard to have healing if we don't believe that we're worthy of it, which I think can be really hard with, again, those of us who struggle with self-worth. But even if we can find somebody who believes in our worth of healing and holds that for us, even if we don't believe that about ourselves, even if it's just really hard to intrinsically believe that. And like, we can tell, like, yes, I'm worthy. But there's something when you can feel it deep down that you're like, oh yeah, like that's different, right? But it's taken me a really long time to get there. A really, really long time. Lots of therapy, lots of conversations, lots of praying, lots of smudging, all of that stuff. But it's totally worth it. I can see it paying off now. But I believe I'm worthy of healing is, again, one of those first steps to healing, whatever it is that you are wanting to heal from, or, you know, whatever that is. So that concludes my portion of me talking at you. And I know I'm a little bit over, but for those of you who can stay, I'm going to stop sharing. For those of you who can stay, I would love it if you had any questions or comments or anything that I could help with. Yeah. Give you a few moments to think. I know I said a lot.